So changes are still being made to the staff in Tuscaloosa, as last night it was announced that Alabama is set to hire a new tight ends coach in Joe Cox, who's previously coached tight ends at Colorado State, as well as wide receivers with South Carolina. We need to talk about this, plus the news surrounding Sal Sunseri moving to an off-the-field role and why that could be massive. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes, N for no. Are you intrigued by the new hire of Joe Cox at tight ends coach? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoy the content, like and comment down below. Those interactions may seem really small, but they truly are massive to content creators such as myself in both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all of that being said, let's hop right into this, and let's first start with Joe Cox. Joe Cox has been a quarterback at the University of Georgia in 2009. He's had experience at Colorado State and then experience at South Carolina. And as I said in the intro, it's not just all relegated to the tight end position. Because even though he has great familiarity with being a tight ends coach due to his time at Colorado State, he's also been a wide receivers coach, as his tenure at South Carolina indicates. That kind of familiarity with multiple positions, I think, is only a net positive in the offense, especially because it shows an understanding of how the wide receiver and tight ends can work together to create ultimate mismatches, or at least that's how I envision it in my head. I could be wildly off base there, but in my opinion, that's a symbiotic marriage, a marriage that allows each position coach to understand the nature of that position and how to maximize those two positions together and create mismatches. So how that's going to work out is going to be very interesting. But as many people have noted, there's a commonality between the hires Alabama has made in Travaris Robinson, Coleman Hutzler, Eric Wolford, and now Joe Cox, and that's that they all served under Will Muschamp at South Carolina. So an interesting little tidbit, but with the hire of Joe Cox, there is a question that must be asked, and what does this mean for Drew Svoboda? Drew Svoboda, being an individual that hailed from the state of Texas, came to the Crimson Tide as the tight ends and special teams coach. Not long ago, Coleman Hutzler was announced to be the special teams coach and outside linebacker coach, and now Joe Cox coming into the tight end position. So, though no word has come down officially about Drew Svoboda, it is interesting to see how that situation is going to play out, because both the position groups he was coaching seem to have been filled, so I am intrigued about that. But talking about a position that has been filled, we need to also talk about Sal Sunseri, the former outside linebackers coach, because when Coleman Hutzler was hired to the Tide, many noted that on his Twitter bio, it had special teams and outside linebackers coach, which prompted the question, what happens to Sal Sunseri? And it didn't take long for Nick Saban to kind of ease the fears. And it didn't take long for Nick Saban to ease the fears of the Tide fan base, stating that Sal Sunseri is going to remain with the Tide, but in the off-the-field role. And that role could be a massive net positive for the Crimson Tide. The role Sal Sunseri will step into is noted as special assistant to the head coach, but primarily, as Saban said it, he's looking for someone to keep up with the transfer portal landscape and to be able to evaluate those who enter the transfer portal. As coaches have evaluators for recruiting classes, but now with the emergence of the transfer portal being such a big part of college football, it's necessary to get somebody in that position as well. And Sal Sunseri has been elite for the Crimson Tide. Getting somebody that you trust in that regard in that position could be a massive move for the Crimson Tide, and we need to watch how it affects the transfer portal and the transfer portal use for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But great to hear that Sal Sunseri will still be involved with the team. That is going to be a massive relief to Tide fans now that that is all out in the open. What a move by Nick Saban, a guy that is all about adaptability. And as I close out, that's what I want to finish on. Nick Saban is the greatest coach that's ever coached college football, and many people acknowledge this at this point, and if you're arguing that, you're really arguing a losing battle, in my opinion. But we don't talk enough about why Nick Saban is so great. We can point to the wins, we can point to the national championships, we can point to the recruiting classes, all valid points, all of which are great points to have in your arsenal if you are debating that Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time. But the thing that really puts it over the edge, in my opinion, actually has a little bit less to do with the X's and O's of football and more to do with the adaptability Nick Saban shows. Whenever you're a defensive guru or an offensive guru, in Nick Saban's case, a defensive guru, you can get stuck in your ways and think to yourself, well, my defense has been successful for so long, I don't need to change, it'll eventually catch up. But Nick Saban has constantly realized that adapting is necessary for success in the college game. Whenever the spread up-tempo offenses became king in college football, Nick Saban didn't fight it. He knew that they were giving his defense fits. There was only one way for Alabama to remain successful and push forward. So he brings in Lane Kiffin, which completely modernizes the Alabama's offense. But in doing so, modernizes Alabama's defense, because Nick Saban got to see an example every day in practice of how the old school defensive tendencies just weren't working anymore against this up-tempo quick offense. So he had to modify. Now you can kind of see the evolution of defense in college football, and you got linebackers running 40s that safeties used to run. I mean, the speed is unbelievable now at the college game, but Nick Saban has no qualms about adapting, where other legendary coaches in their own rights have had a much harder time adapting. To me, that's the difference between Nick Saban and everybody else. Nick Saban doesn't let pride compromise his ability to adapt, and that ability to adapt has kept him on top of the college game for so many years, on top of his ability to coach, his X's and O's, and his recruiting ability. It's when you put it all together. In order to be a head coach, being a brilliant football mind is necessary, but you also have to be a CEO. And I think that that's the thing that gets passed up by a lot of people. You have to be able to know how to run an organization, and Nick Saban runs an organization as well as anybody in the nation. But I'm very interested in hearing from y'all about the hires of Joe Cox, about the news involving Sal Sunseri, and what you think will happen with Drew Svoboda. That's it. See ya.